I always thought my family was unbreakable. Until the night we all told the truth. One confession nearly ended us. Another one saved us. And I'm still not sure which hurt more. I never planned to go to that dinner. In fact, I had already rehearsed the excuses I would send to my mother, the ones I'd been using for years to avoid sitting at that table with the people I once called home. I told myself I was too busy, that work was overwhelming, that I didn't have the energy for small talk or awkward silences. But underneath all of those reasons was a truth I didn't want to face. I didn't know how to be part of that family anymore. Somewhere along the line, without any explosion or dramatic breakup, we became strangers who shared a last name and little else. My mother's message arrived on a Wednesday afternoon. It was short, almost too casual: Sunday, 6 p.m. Please come. No emojis, no explanation, no guilt tripping. But somehow that made it harder to ignore. My mother wasn't the kind of person who said please unless she truly meant it. And the fact that she didn't add anything else, no, we miss you, no, your brother will be here, no, it would mean a lot to me, made the message feel like the digital equivalent of someone standing silently in your doorway, waiting for you to look up. I stared at the message for hours. It felt strange how such a small thing could unravel me. But that's the thing about families, the smallest messages sometimes carry the heaviest truths. I kept trying to convince myself it was just another dinner. Just food. Just conversation. But I knew better. My mother only hosted family dinners when something was wrong. Usually something emotional, something delicate, something she didn't know how to talk about directly. By Saturday night, I had almost convinced myself not to go. I paced around my apartment like a trapped animal, opening the fridge just to close it again, scrolling through social media without seeing a single post, starting and stopping movies I didn't care about. The idea of walking back into that house felt like stepping into a memory I wasn't sure I wanted to relive. A memory of who we used to be, and who we no longer were. My brother and I hadn't spoken in almost a year. Not because something happened, but because nothing did. That's the kind of silence that hurts the most. The kind that grows without reason, without conflict, without a moment to point at and say, this is where it went wrong. We simply drifted. First a few days without talking, then weeks, then months. And eventually, reaching out felt like reopening a wound we both pretended wasn't there. But on Sunday afternoon, something shifted. Maybe it was the guilt. Maybe it was the loneliness I pretended I didn't feel. Maybe it was the realization that family doesn't wait forever. Or maybe it was the way I caught my own reflection in the bathroom mirror, tired, older than I should look, eyes holding questions I'd been avoiding for too long. For the first time in months, I wondered what my brother looked like now. Whether he still smiled the same way. Whether he'd changed. Whether he'd still recognized the person I had become. At 5:12 p.m., without giving myself time to reconsider, I grabbed my keys and walked out the door. The air outside was colder than I expected, sharp and biting, the kind that made everything feel more real. The drive to my childhood home felt like a road trip through memories I had locked away, the gas station where we used to buy snacks before family trips, the old bakery where my father once forgot my birthday cake, the street where my brother taught me to ride a bike and then laughed when I crashed into a bush. All of it flooded back into me, and with every memory came something harder to face, the quiet ache of missing something I had pretended didn't matter anymore. When I turned onto my parents' street, I almost turned back. The house looked the same, painfully the same, the porch light flickering the way it always did, my mother's garden too perfectly trimmed, the curtains slightly open as if someone inside was waiting. I parked across the street, gripping the steering wheel like it could anchor me. For a moment, I just sat there, listening to the ticking of the car engine as it cooled. My heart felt too loud, the kind of loud that reminds you you're about to face something real. Finally, I forced myself out of the car. The walk to the door felt longer than it should have. When I raised my hand to knock, I hesitated, because once that door opened, there would be no hiding. No excuses. No distance. Just us. Whatever us even meant now. I knocked. And when the door opened, everything inside me shifted. My mother opened the door with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. It wasn't forced, exactly, just fragile, as if it had been practiced too many times in the mirror. She always did that when she was worried. She smiled a little too widely, held it a little too long, and hoped no one would notice the tremor underneath. But I noticed. I always noticed. Maybe that was part of the reason I stayed away for so long, because noticing comes with responsibility, and I wasn't sure I could carry anyone else's emotions when I barely understood my own. You made it, she said softly, stepping aside so I could enter. Yeah. I'm here, I managed, though my voice didn't sound like mine. The house smelled exactly the same as it did when I was a teenager, roasted vegetables, freshly baked bread, a hint of laundry detergent lingering in the air. It was a smell that once meant comfort. Safety. Home. Now it felt like a time capsule I wasn't ready to open. Every scent pulled me backward into a version of myself I had outgrown but never fully left behind. My brother was already there. I saw him before he saw me, sitting at the dining table with his back to the doorway. His posture struck me first, shoulders slightly hunched, head lowered, fingers idly tracing the rim of his glass. He looked smaller, somehow. Not physically, but in presence. Like some part of him had folded inward. My chest tightened. When he finally turned around, our eyes met, and for a moment neither of us said anything. His face was older than I remembered. Not in a dramatic way, just a little more lined, a little more tired, as if the last year had carved a few extra shadows beneath his eyes. He gave me a faint smile, polite and distant, like you'd give someone you used to know well but weren't sure how to greet anymore. Hey, he said. Hey, I replied. It was the sort of greeting that belonged to acquaintances, not siblings. The kind that tasted more like an apology than a hello. My mother, sensing the stiffness, began fussing with the food, moving dishes unnecessarily, adjusting things that didn't need adjusting. Anxiety through motion, her specialty. Dinner's almost ready, she said, though everything was clearly already on the table. We sat down. The clink of cutlery and plates being moved filled the silence, and somehow that sound felt louder than any argument could have. My father wasn't there, he was out of town for work, and in a strange way, I was grateful. He had always been the one who tried to fix things too quickly, to make everything normal again with forced positivity. This dinner needed quiet, not solutions. For a while, we ate in near silence. My mother asked me about work. I answered with vague, harmless details. She asked my brother how he'd been sleeping, a question that made him stiffen almost imperceptibly. He shrugged like it didn't matter. She pretended she believed him. The whole scene felt like a play we'd all performed too many times. Eventually, she excused herself to get dessert, a transparent strategy to leave us alone. When the kitchen door swung shut behind her, the air shifted. It wasn't tension exactly, but something heavier. Something real. How have you been? I asked, because someone had to say something. He inhaled slowly, exhaled even slower. Busy, he said. Then, after a moment, you. Same. Busy. It was the kind of exchange that could have passed between two strangers in an elevator. Yet underneath it was a river of things unsaid, resentment, regret, longing, fear. If emotions could speak without words, the room would have been deafening. I studied him more closely. The dark circles under his eyes. The way he kept rubbing his thumb against his knuckles. The way he avoided looking at me for too long. Every detail felt like a clue I wasn't sure how to interpret. I wanted to ask 100 questions. Where have you been? Why did you stop calling? What happened to you? But none of them felt safe to say out loud. So I swallowed them all, letting them sit like stones in my stomach. You okay? I asked finally, the words softer than I intended. He paused. Looked at his plate. Looked at the ceiling. Looked anywhere but at me. Yeah, he said. But the tremor in his voice betrayed him. It wasn't convincing. It wasn't meant to be. Sometimes a lie is just a request not to be pushed. Before I could decide whether to push anyway, he spoke again. I didn't think you'd come tonight. The statement hit harder than it should have. Why? He shrugged. You've been gone. I haven't been gone, I said too quickly. He raised an eyebrow, not accusingly, just knowingly. You kind of have. I opened my mouth to argue, but the words withered before they reached my tongue. Because he was right. I had pulled away. Not because of him, but because distance felt easier than dealing with the parts of myself I didn't want anyone to see. But try explaining that to someone without sounding selfish. I'm here now, I said quietly. Yeah, he whispered. You are. There was something in his tone I couldn't decipher, relief, maybe. Or maybe fear. Maybe both. Before either of us could say more, the kitchen door swung open and my mother returned with a tray of desserts she'd almost definitely prepared hours ago. Her eyes flicked between us, reading the tension the way only mothers can. She set the tray down, sat, and forced a smile. It didn't work. Because even she could feel it. Something in this family was cracking. And we were pretending not to hear the sound. Dessert sat untouched in front of us. My mother had made her usual apple crumble, the one she used to bake on Sunday evenings when we were kids, when the house felt warmer and quieter, when we believed that closeness was something permanent. The scent of cinnamon drifted through the room, but instead of comfort, it only brought a strange heaviness to my chest, nostalgia mixed with regret. The kind of regret that colors everything around you a shade darker. My brother pushed the dessert around his plate with a fork, not eating, not speaking. I glanced at him, wondering if he remembered the last time we'd shared this meal without tension. I couldn't recall. That realization hurt more than I expected. My mother tried to keep the conversation alive, asking questions with forced enthusiasm, about work, about errands, about trivial things no one actually cared about. Small talk is a life raft. But my brother answered with monosyllables, and I answered with half-truths. The silence between each exchange grew longer, thicker, until even she gave up trying. When she finally went to the kitchen again to check on the tea, I knew it was another deliberate exit. Another attempt to give us space. Space, however, is useless when you don't know what to fill it with. For a long moment, we just sat there, listening to the faint clinking of cups in the kitchen, the rustle of drawers opening and closing. My brother leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed somewhere far away in his mind. I'm not great at this, he said finally. At what? I asked, though I already knew. Talking. Explaining. You know. He paused, rubbing the back of his neck. A nervous habit. I don't want this to be weird. It's already weird, I said softly. But that's okay. He let out a slow breath, the kind people release when they've been holding too much inside. I didn't think we'd get like this, he admitted. You and me. Neither did I. Growing up, we were inseparable, not because we had the same interests, but because we existed in a world where we were each other's constant. He taught me how to build a treehouse, how to fix a bike chain, how to sneak snacks past our mother without getting caught. I taught him how to cheat at board games, how to lie convincingly to save him from trouble, how to find shortcuts to everything. We were a team. Always. Until we weren't. What happened to us, he asked. It was a simple question, but it felt enormous. Like opening a door to a room we hadn't entered in years. I don't know, I said honestly. Life, I guess. He frowned slightly. That's not a real answer. He was right. But real answers often hurt, and I wasn't sure he was ready for the full truth, or if I was. You stopped calling, he said after a moment. So did you, I replied. But you first. The words weren't spoken with accusation, just clarity. Still, they struck something inside me, a bruise I thought had healed but apparently hadn't. I know, I said quietly. I know. I pulled away. He looked at me then, really looked, and for the first time that night I saw something raw in his eyes, confusion, sadness, maybe even fear. The kind of fear that comes from losing someone without understanding how or when it happened. Why? He asked. That question lodged itself in my throat. Because how do you explain to someone that you pulled away not because of them, but because of yourself? Because of the person you were becoming, the person you were afraid to become, and the person you didn't want them to see? Things got heavy, I said after a moment. I didn't want to drag anyone into it. He scoffed softly. Not mocking, just disbelieving. You think you're the only one with heavy things? I swallowed hard. The truth sat bitter on my tongue. No. I didn't want to be a burden. This time, he laughed a short, humorless laugh. A burden? To me? He shook his head, almost offended. Do you even hear yourself? I looked down at my hands, unsure of what to say. Do you know how many times I wanted to call you, he continued, voice low but steady. How many times I typed out a message and then deleted it because I thought you didn't want to hear from me. That caught me off guard. Why would you think that? Because you disappeared, he said simply. And I didn't know how to bring you back. The words hit harder than I expected. He wasn't blaming me, he was confessing. And that was somehow worse. I was dealing with a lot, I said quietly. And you always seemed so steady. Like you didn't need anything from me. He scoffed again, but softer this time. You have no idea. Before I could ask what he meant, my mother returned with a tray of tea. She took one look at our faces and froze, sensing she had walked in on something fragile. Her eyes darted between us, full of cautious hope. I'll just set this here, she murmured, placing the tray on the table. She hovered for a moment, as if unsure whether to stay or leave. Then she retreated again, giving us space neither of us knew how to use. My brother leaned forward, elbows on the table. Listen, he said, voice low. I'm not angry. I miss you. And I don't know how to say that without sounding pathetic. I swallowed the lump in my throat. It's not pathetic. It feels like it. Well, I whispered, I missed you too. Silence fell again, but this time it was different. Softer. Less hostile. A silence filled with potential rather than absence. He let out a slow breath. There's something I need to tell you, he said. But I don't know how. A chill crept up my spine, not fear, but anticipation. A sense that the night was about to tilt into a deeper truth. What is it? I asked, voice gentle. He opened his mouth, hesitated, closed it again. Then he looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen on him since we were teenagers, vulnerable, uncertain, afraid. I need you to listen, he said. I'm listening. But before he could speak, my mother called from the kitchen. Could you two come in here for a second? He stiffened immediately. Whatever he was about to say, it wasn't something he wanted her to hear. He whispered, later. And for the first time all night, I believed him. The kitchen felt warmer than the dining room, not because of the oven or the tea kettle humming on the stove, but because my mother was there, and she always radiated a certain anxious energy that heated the air around her. When we stepped inside, she was standing by the counter, hands clasped so tightly that her knuckles had gone pale. Something in her posture made my stomach twist. She wasn't just nervous, she was bracing herself. I didn't want to interrupt, she said quietly. Turning toward us, but I think it's time we talked about something important. My brother and I exchanged a quick glance, not one of unity, but one of instinctive alertness. The last time she had used that tone, she'd announced she was separating from our father. Before that, she told us our grandmother had died. The word important in her vocabulary usually meant one thing, something painful. What's going on? My brother asked. She took a slow breath. I didn't want to tell you like this, but your father's been struggling. She paused, searching for the right word. A lot. I frowned. Struggling how? Her eyes flicked briefly to my brother, then back to me. With work. With stress. With everything. He's been distant. Forgetful. Short-tempered. And I didn't know if it was my place to say anything before tonight, but I think you both need to know. My brother's jaw tightened. He should be the one telling us. I know, she said softly. But he won't. Or maybe he doesn't know how. The air between us thickened. This wasn't what I expected. I'd prepared myself mentally for tension between me and my brother, for conversations about distance or resentment or wounds that never healed. I hadn't prepared for this. For the idea that the person who'd always been the emotional anchor of our home was now drifting. My brother ran a hand over his face, letting out a slow, tired sigh. Why didn't you tell us sooner? Because I didn't want to worry you, she whispered. And because he asked me not to. I felt something inside me twist with frustration, not at her, but at the familiar pattern playing out before me. My father had always handled his emotions quietly, by burying them under work, chores, routines. He was the kind of man who believed that speaking about a problem made it real, so he simply refused to speak. He hid his pain in the spaces between his words. What does this have to do with us? I asked, the question harsher than I intended. She looked at me with an expression that made my chest tighten. Because families fall apart quietly, she said. Piece by piece. And I'm tired of watching it happen. The room fell silent. She leaned back against the counter, her face softening with exhaustion. You two barely speak. Your father barely comes home. I walk through this house and it feels like everyone is disappearing one by one. Her voice cracked slightly. I don't want to lose any more of you. My brother stepped forward and put a hand on her shoulder. It was a simple gesture, but it held more emotion than any words could have. She placed her hand over his and exhaled, a long, trembling breath that suggested she had been holding this inside for far too long. I stood there, feeling both present and distant, like a ghost observing my own family. A part of me wanted to step forward, to comfort her the way my brother just had. Another part of me hesitated, stuck between guilt and uncertainty. You can't comfort someone you've been avoiding. You can't fix something you haven't even acknowledged is broken. What do you want us to do? My brother asked gently. I want you to be here, she said. Not just physically. I want you two to talk. To try. To stop pretending everything is fine. We're trying, he said. She shook her head. No. You're surviving. All of you. Your father. You too. Me. Her voice steadied. I want us to live again. I swallowed hard. My mother wasn't emotional like this often. When she was, it meant something inside her had reached its limit. Before I could respond, she turned to me. You left us long before you moved out, she said suddenly. The words hit like a punch. They weren't angry. They were simply true. I opened my mouth, unsure what to say. You drifted, she continued. And I let you. I told myself you needed space, that you were busy, that you'd come back on your own. She paused, eyes softening. But you didn't. My throat tightened. I didn't know you felt that way. That's the problem, she said quietly. None of us know how the others feel anymore. My brother stepped closer to me, as if drawn by some instinctive pull. It wasn't just you, he said. I drifted too. But at least you stayed in orbit, my mother said. Tears gathering in her eyes. She left completely. The words hung in the air, painful and heavy. And the worst part was, I didn't have a defense. I had left. Emotionally, mentally, bit by bit. Because leaving quietly is always easier than explaining why you're going. I'm sorry, I said finally, voice cracking. I didn't know how to stay. My brother looked at me with something like recognition, as if he understood that sentence more deeply than he let on. My mother wiped her eyes, trying to regain composure. I didn't bring you here to blame you, she said softly. I brought you here because I can't hold this family together by myself anymore. That sentence settled between us like a marker, the point where everything before and after would differ. Before we could respond, the front door opened. We all froze. My father was home. He stepped into the hallway, jacket still on, eyes weary, face pale with exhaustion. When he saw the three of us in the kitchen, he stopped mid-step. There was confusion in his eyes, and something else. Fear. Not of us. Of being seen. Am I interrupting something? He asked, voice low. My mother exchanged a glance with us, a silent agreement passing between all three of us. This was the moment everything would change. And for the first time in years. We were all in the same room to witness it. My father stood in the doorway like someone who had walked into the wrong house. His eyes moved from my mother to my brother, then finally to me, and something in his expression shifted, not dramatically, not visibly to the untrained eye, but enough for me to recognize the flicker of guilt, the quick tightening of his jaw, the faint hesitation in his step. I had grown up watching him conceal emotions like this the same way he'd patch cracks in the walls, quietly, quickly, pretending they were never there. He placed his keys on the counter, too gently, as if afraid any sudden movement would shatter the fragile atmosphere we were suspended in. You're all here, he said slowly, his voice threaded with confusion and something else I couldn't quite place. Did I forget something? My mother didn't answer right away. She took a breath, one hand resting lightly on the edge of the counter for support. We were talking, she said softly. He nodded, though it was the kind of nod people give when they're pretending to understand something they'd rather avoid. About what? Another pause. Then, about us. The words hung in the air like dust in sunlight, visible, tangible, impossible to ignore. My father's shoulders tensed. I see. He didn't ask for details. He didn't step further into the room. He stood at the threshold as though crossing that invisible line would require a kind of vulnerability he wasn't sure he could afford. My brother shifted slightly, leaning his weight from one leg to the other. I could feel him bracing. The room felt like a stage where everyone knew their lines except the main actor, who had walked in unprepared. My mother approached my father slowly, as if trying not to startle him. You've been distant, she said gently. And we're worried. He closed his eyes briefly, exhaling through his nose. I'm fine, he said quickly. Too quickly. The kind of quick that means the opposite. My mother shook her head. You're not. He opened his mouth as if to argue, then closed it. His gaze dropped to the floor, lingering on a small crack in the tile. I don't want to do this right now, he muttered. That's the problem, my mother whispered. You never want to do this. You never want to talk. You never want to let us in. And now the children barely speak to each other, and you barely look at me, and her voice broke. I'm tired. My father's head snapped up, eyes sharpening with alarm. Tired? What do you mean tired? I mean I can't be the glue holding everyone together while the rest of you crumble, she said. I can't pretend everything's fine when I'm the only one trying. My father's face softened, but only for a moment. You think I'm not trying? I think you're drowning, she corrected. But you don't want anyone to notice. That struck him. Hard. I could see it in the way his expression tightened. In the way he swallowed before speaking. I'm doing the best I can, he said quietly. No, my mother said gently, you're doing it alone. And that's not the same thing. Silence spilled into the room again, but this time it felt heavier, weighted with truths that had gone unspoken for years. My father finally stepped inside, moving toward the kitchen table. He placed both hands on the back of a chair and leaned into it, like he needed the support. You think I wanted things to get like this? He asked, voice trembling just slightly. You think I don't see what's happening? Of course I see it. My brother let out a breath he'd been holding. Then why didn't you say anything? Because, my father snapped, then caught himself, lowering his voice. Because I didn't know how. I was trying to fix everything quietly. That's what I do. I fix things. You can't fix people like pipes and door hinges, my mother said softly. You have to talk to them. He looked at her with something close to despair. Talking won't change anything. It already is, she said. He hesitated before letting out a defeated sigh. His gaze drifted toward me, just for a moment. Our eyes met, and something shifted between us, an acknowledgement of distance, of time lost, of the silence that had stretched so far it became a canyon. You barely come around anymore, he said to me, not accusing, just observing. I didn't know I was needed, I said truthfully. You're always needed, he replied, voice cracking on the last word. My throat closed. I looked down at the floor, willing myself not to cry. My brother stood beside me, quiet but present, like a shadow I'd forgotten belonged to me. My father ran a hand through his hair, visibly torn, as if wrestling with something he didn't want to admit. I've been overwhelmed, he said finally. Work has been impossible. I'm tired all the time. I can't focus. Some days I feel like if I stop moving, everything will collapse. My mother stepped toward him, placing a gentle hand on his arm. You should have told us. I didn't want to worry you. You already did. My father looked at her, really looked, and I saw years of love, frustration, fear, and longing in that single glance. Then he looked at us. At me. At my brother. His eyes softened. I don't know how to be the father you want me to be, he admitted. My brother shook his head. We don't need perfect. We just need you, I whispered. The words left my mouth before I could stop them. Everyone in the room froze for a heartbeat. Then my father's expression cracked, just slightly, but enough to reveal something raw, something wounded. He sat down heavily in the nearest chair, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. I feel like I'm failing all of you, he said. Every day. My mother knelt in front of him. You're not failing. You're struggling. There's a difference. My brother moved to stand beside them. I hesitated at first, that old familiar distance pulling me backward, then I took one step forward. Then another. Until I stood next to them too. A broken family, trying. For the first time in years, we were physically close. Not fixed. Not healed. But present. And then my mother said something that shifted everything. There's something else we need to talk about, she said softly. Something I've been keeping from both of you. My brother glanced at her sharply. What do you mean? Keeping what? She inhaled shakily. I didn't want to tell you until your father was ready, but he got some medical tests done last month. My heart dropped. My father closed his eyes. My brother whispered, what tests? My mother looked at us, expression trembling, as the truth began to break the surface. And that was the moment I realized. Whatever cracks we had in this family. We were about to see what had been hiding beneath them all along. My mother didn't speak immediately after dropping that sentence into the room. She stood perfectly still, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, knuckles white, shoulders trembling so faintly that you would miss it if you weren't looking directly at her. My father stared down at the floor as if hoping it might swallow him whole. My brother and I stood frozen, unable to breathe, unable to think, waiting for a truth that was suddenly too heavy to rush. Finally, my mother exhaled, one long, breaking breath that seemed to deflate the entire room. Then she looked at us, her children, with eyes that carried a weight I had never seen in them before. Fear. Love. Helplessness. And guilt. I didn't want to scare you, she said softly. But your father got some test results back last month. They weren't what we hoped for. My brother stepped forward immediately. What kind of tests? My father lifted his head, but not enough to meet our eyes. His voice was quiet, rough. Neurological. Everything inside me went still. My mother touched his shoulder gently, grounding him. He flinched, just barely, then allowed the touch. She took one more breath. He's been having trouble, she said. Memory issues. Difficulty concentrating. Mood swings. Losing words. The doctor said it could be stress at first, but when things got worse. I felt the world narrowing, like the air was sinking downward instead of filling my lungs. Not this. Anything but this. My brother closed his eyes, pressing his fingers against his forehead as if trying to hold himself together. And you didn't tell us? We wanted to be sure, my mother said. But then the MRI showed. My father abruptly interrupted, voice strained. We don't know anything for certain yet. But we will, she finished quietly. Silence crashed down like a wave. I looked at my father, really looked at him, and suddenly all the small things I had ignored took on a new, painful meaning. The forgotten birthdays. The misplaced tools. The way he repeated questions. The way he drifted out of conversations without realizing. The exhaustion etched into his face. I had chalked it all up to stress. To age. To distance. I never imagined it might be something bigger. Something irreversible. My father finally raised his eyes to meet ours. The pain in them was unbearable, raw, transparent, terrified. I didn't want you to see me like this, he said. My voice cracked. Like what? Like someone who's slipping. He swallowed hard, blinking rapidly. I'm supposed to be the strong one. The steady one. The one who keeps everything together. And now I can't even keep my own thoughts straight. My brother stepped closer to him. Dad. I feel like a burden, my father whispered. The same words I had used earlier to justify my distance. They echoed through the room like a mirror shattering. You're not a burden, my brother said fiercely. How do you know, my father whispered. How do you know what's coming? I don't even know what's coming. My mother quietly wiped her face with the sleeve of her sweater, her eyes shining with tears that she kept trying to blink away. We're going to face it together, she said. But I can't do it alone. My father looked at her then, really looked at her, and the devastation in his eyes broke something inside me. Because I suddenly realized how long she had been carrying this by herself. How many nights she must have lain awake, listening to his restless footsteps in the hallway. How often she must have pretended everything was fine in front of us, even when her world was cracking open. I felt a surge of guilt so strong it almost made me dizzy. Why didn't you call me? I whispered. My mother turned toward me, her expression soft but weary. Because you don't call back. The words weren't accusatory. They were simply true. I swallowed hard, blinking away the heat behind my eyes. I should have been here. My father shook his head. No. I didn't want you to be. I didn't want either of you to worry. But we're family, my brother said, voice trembling. We're supposed to worry about each other. My father's face twisted. I didn't want to be the reason you two drifted further. That's not why we drifted, I said quietly. That was me. My father looked confused. My brother glanced at me sharply. My mother nodded, as if she had known all along. I pulled away, I admitted. Not because I didn't care. But because I didn't know how to deal with everything happening in my own life, and I thought it was easier to disappear than explain myself. My father stared at me with an expression that broke my heart. Not anger. Sadness. You leaving hurt, he said softly. More than you know. My throat tightened until I could barely breathe. I'm sorry, I whispered. My father gave a small, fragile nod. I know. My brother suddenly stepped between us. We can't do this, he said, voice cracking. We can't fall apart like this while he's going through whatever this is. My mother moved closer to him. We're not falling apart, she said. We're breaking open. There's a difference. I didn't understand what she meant at first. But then she continued, softly. Breaking apart destroys a family. Breaking open gives it a chance to rebuild. My father lowered his head, overcome with emotion. My brother wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. And I realized, with a sudden, painful clarity, that this dinner, this night, was never meant to fix us instantly. It was meant to reveal what was underneath all the silence. The tension. The distance. The cracks. Because only when something breaks open can you finally see the truth inside it. My mother touched my father's face gently, turning him toward her. We're going to get through this, she said. But not if we all keep pretending. He nodded slowly, his breathing uneven. Then he whispered the words he had been hiding, words I will never forget. I'm scared. The room fell silent. My mother reached for his hand. My brother reached for his other. I hesitated. Only for a moment. Then I reached too. For the first time in years. We formed a circle. Not perfect. Not healed. But unbroken. For the first time. We faced something not as individuals. But as a family. And yet, deep down. I knew this was only the beginning. For a long moment, none of us moved. We stood there with our hands connected, like a fragile chain that could either hold or snap at any second. My father's breathing was shallow, uneven, his shoulders trembling under the weight of finally admitting aloud what he had been carrying in silence. My mother held his hand with both of hers now, grounding him the way she always had, even when he didn't realize he needed it. My brother's jaw was clenched, not with anger but with fear of losing what little stability remained. And I stood there, feeling the warmth of their hands, wondering how long it had been since any of us had touched one another without hesitation. My father lifted his head, eyes glistening. I don't want you to see me decline, he said quietly. I don't want to become someone you have to take care of. My mother immediately shook her head. You took care of us for decades. Let us return the favor. It's not the same, he whispered. It's not supposed to be the same. What does that mean? My brother asked, voice strained. It means, my father said, swallowing hard, that I used to know who I was. And now I feel like I'm fading. Like someone keeps erasing pieces of me when I'm not looking. His voice cracked. What if one day I don't remember you? What if I forget who I am? My mother squeezed his hand tightly. We won't let that happen. You can't prevent it, he said, almost angrily. You can't control this. You can't fix me. I can't even fix myself. The force of his words shattered the fragile calm we'd been balancing on. My mother stepped back, hurt flickering in her eyes. My brother's breath hitched. And me, something inside me snapped. Because I realized in that moment that this dinner hadn't brought us together. It had simply exposed how far apart we had drifted. I can't do this, my father muttered, turning away. My brother grabbed his arm. Dad, wait. Let go, he said sharply. No, my brother insisted. We're not done. My father pulled his arm away, staggering back a step. I said let go. His voice echoed in the kitchen, sharp and jarring. My mother flinched. I froze. My brother stood his ground, chest heaving, eyes wide not with anger but with panic. He had always been the peacekeeper, the calmer one. Hearing our father shout at him carved something raw into the air. Stop, my mother whispered. Please. But no one stopped. Not yet. My brother stepped forward again. You can't push us away because you're scared. That's not fair. Fair, my father repeated, almost laughing in disbelief. You think this is about fairness? Then what is it about, my brother demanded. It's about reality, my father shouted. About the fact that I'm not the person I used to be. And I don't want my family watching me disappear piece by piece. His voice cracked at the last word, disappear, as if saying it aloud broke something open inside him. My mother covered her mouth, shoulders shaking. My brother's breathing turned ragged. And me, I felt something erupt in my chest that I had been holding down for years. Then why didn't you tell us sooner? I suddenly demanded. Why did you make Mom carry this alone? Why did you let us drift like strangers instead of asking for help? He looked at me, stunned by the force of my voice. I stepped closer. Do you know how many times I thought you didn't care anymore? How many nights I convinced myself I was the problem because no one in this family talks about anything real? He blinked, startled. We're all drowning, I continued, voice shaking. All of us. And instead of reaching for each other, we just sink in silence. That's why I left. Not because I didn't love you. But because I didn't know how to stay in a house that pretended everything was fine while everyone was falling apart. My mother let out a quiet sob. My brother looked at me with a mixture of pain and understanding, like suddenly everything made sense. My father, though, he looked wounded. Deeply. You think I don't love you, he whispered. No, I said. I think you don't know how to let us love you. The words hit him like a physical blow. He staggered back, one hand gripping the counter for support, eyes brimming with something vast and broken. I'm trying, he said weakly. I swear I'm trying. I know, I whispered. But trying alone isn't enough anymore. He shook his head, tears slipping down his cheeks. I don't want you to see me as weak. My brother stepped forward, voice gentle. Dad, being sick isn't weak. My father looked away. It feels like it. My mother reached for him again. Let us in. He didn't pull away this time. But the collapse had already begun. Because suddenly my brother's voice rose, trembling, raw. Why didn't you ever tell me you were proud of me? The room froze. My father looked confused. What? My brother's voice cracked. I've been waiting my whole life to hear you say it. My father blinked rapidly. Of course I'm proud. Then why didn't you say it? My brother shouted, the words tearing free like something that had been buried under years of silence. All you did was expect more. Push more. Criticize more. Nothing was ever enough for you. My father's eyes widened, horrified. That's not true. It is, my brother insisted, tears streaming down his face now. You never looked at me the way you looked at her. The words hit me like ice. Me. My throat closed instantly. What? My brother turned toward me, crying openly now. He always praised you. Always defended you. Always said you were the one who would go far. He wiped his nose with the back of his sleeve. I spent my entire childhood trying to match something that wasn't even real. My father stared at him in shock, mouth slightly open, eyes frantic. That's why I drifted, my brother said, voice cracking. Not because of you. Not because of work. Because I felt invisible in this house. My father moved toward him instinctively. You were never invisible. Then why didn't you ever say anything, my brother cried. Why didn't you ever tell me I was enough? My father's face broke, completely broke, like the truth had punched straight through all his defenses at once. I thought you knew, he whispered. I thought it was obvious. It wasn't, my brother said, shaking. It never was. My father reached for him, hands trembling. I'm sorry, he said, voice cracking. I'm so sorry. My mother stood between them, crying quietly, overwhelmed. And me, my legs felt weak beneath me. Because I had never asked for favoritism. Never realized my brother saw it that way. The truth was ripping through all of us at once. My father broke completely then, sinking into a chair, sobbing into his hands, years of silence pouring out of him all at once. My brother collapsed into a seat opposite him, crying like a child who had finally been heard for the first time. My mother knelt between them, one hand on each, trying to hold together a family that had just shattered itself wide open. And I stood there. Feeling everything fall apart. And somehow, for the first time, begin to fall into place. Because breaking is painful. But breaking open is necessary. And tonight, we were all breaking. For a long time after the shouting stopped, the house settled into a kind of silence that wasn't empty but full of everything we had just spilled onto the floor like broken glass. Tears, confessions, regrets, truths that had been suffocating inside our chests for years all lay there between us, and for once we weren't pretending not to see them. No one spoke. No one moved. We just breathed, shaky and uneven, as if learning how to inhale again after holding our breath for too long. My father was the first to break the stillness. He lifted his head slowly, eyes swollen and red, lines on his face deeper than I'd ever noticed. He looked older in that moment, fragile, almost, but also strangely more human than I'd ever seen him. A man stripped of the armor he'd worn his entire life. I didn't know, he whispered, voice rough from crying. I didn't know you felt that way. Either of you. My brother wiped his face. We didn't know how to tell you. My father looked down at his hands, turning them over as if seeing them for the first time. I thought, he swallowed hard. I thought I was doing the right thing by staying strong. By not showing weakness. By keeping my struggles to myself. His voice cracked. But all I did was push you away. My mother moved closer to him, placing a gentle hand on his back. Strength is in silence, she said softly. Silence is isolation. He leaned into her touch, a small, broken gesture that carried the weight of years. I didn't want to disappoint anyone. You didn't disappoint us, she said. You scared us. But you didn't disappoint us. My brother exhaled shakily. Dad, we're not kids anymore. We don't need you to be perfect. My father looked at him through tear-filled eyes. Then what do you need? My brother hesitated, then answered quietly, you. Just you. Honest. The word hung in the air, fragile and powerful at the same time. Honest. Not strong. Not flawless. Not unbreakable. Just honest. My father nodded slowly, like he was trying the word on for size. I can try, he whispered. I don't know if I'll be good at it. But I can try. That was the moment, subtle, almost invisible, when I felt something shift in the room. A soft turning. A loosening of knots. A beginning. I stepped closer, finally allowing myself to enter the circle that had formed around my father. We're here, I said. No matter what happens. He looked at me with an expression I had never seen on his face before, raw gratitude mixed with relief. I'm scared, he whispered again. I know, I said, and this time I didn't hesitate before taking his hand. We all are. He squeezed my hand weakly. I don't want to be a burden. You're not, I said. Being loved isn't a burden. My mother let out a quiet sob at that, covering her mouth. My brother reached out and pulled her into the circle too, and suddenly we were all together, not perfectly, not seamlessly, but for the first time in years, truly together. My father took a shaky breath. There's something else, he said quietly. We all tensed. He sighed, defeated. The doctor thinks it could be early cognitive decline. Maybe something degenerative. They're not sure yet. The words hit like a slow, inevitable wave. My mother closed her eyes, bracing herself. My brother swallowed hard. I felt something collapse inside me, a quiet breaking, not loud like earlier, but deep, like a foundation shifting. How soon will we know? My brother asked. My father shrugged helplessly. There's another round of tests next month. And until then? I asked. He shook his head. I don't know. We wait. We watch. We hope. Hope. The most fragile verb in existence. My mother wrapped her arms around him. He buried his face in her shoulder, shoulders shaking. My brother reached out, hesitating only a moment before placing his hand on our father's back. I stepped beside them, not touching at first, old habits die slow, but eventually, slowly, I rested my hand on my father's arm. We stayed like that for a long time. No words. No explanations. Just breathing together, sharing the weight of something none of us knew how to carry alone. Eventually, my father pulled back, wiping his face. I'm sorry, he said again, softer this time. For the distance. For the pressure. For everything. My brother shook his head. We all made mistakes. That's what families do, my mother said quietly. We make mistakes. And then we learn. My father let out a breath that sounded like surrender and acceptance woven together. I thought I had to protect you from the worst parts of me. You protected us so much, I said, that we never learned how to protect each other. The words surprised even me, but they felt true the moment they left my lips. My brother nodded. Maybe this is our chance to start over. My father looked at him, then at me, then at my mother. I want that, he said. I want to start over. If you'll have me. My mother kissed his forehead. We never left. My brother forced a small smile. Yeah. We're not going anywhere. I didn't speak right away. I felt everyone's eyes shift toward me, waiting, not for a perfect sentence, not for a promise, but for something honest. I want that too, I said finally. I want us back. My father nodded, tears returning to his eyes. No one moved. No one pushed for more. It was enough. Later, when the tension had softened into something gentler, we moved back to the dining room. My mother reheated the tea. My brother cleared plates. My father sat at the table, exhausted but calmer, watching his family move around him with a softness in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. When I sat beside him, he reached out and touched my hand, a small, hesitant gesture, but full of meaning. I'm glad you came tonight, he whispered. I am too, I said. And for the first time, I meant it. The house felt different then, not fixed, not healed, but open. As if all the walls we'd built had finally cracked just enough for the light to seep in. The house felt strangely lighter in the hours that followed, as if all the tension that had built up over years had finally loosened its grip on the walls. We didn't suddenly become perfect. We didn't suddenly understand each other completely. But something fundamental had shifted, something subtle but unmistakable, like the air after a storm. The heaviness was still there, but it was no longer suffocating. It was shared now. Distributed between us instead of held alone. My mother brought out the reheated tea, though she admitted she had forgotten to add sugar. We laughed, not because it was funny, but because we needed to laugh at something, anything, to remind ourselves that joy wasn't forbidden in the aftermath of pain. My father drank his tea slowly, holding the cup with both hands as if grounding himself in its warmth. My brother sat across from him, elbows on the table, staring at the wood grain like it might reveal some answers. I sat beside them, noticing things I hadn't noticed in years, the small chip on the rim of my father's favorite mug, the photograph on the wall that had been crooked for months, the way my mother hummed under her breath when she was trying not to cry. All these tiny details felt magnified now, like pieces of a home I had forgotten how to see. At some point, my brother began clearing the plates again even though they didn't need clearing. He wiped the same spot on the table 3 times, then gave up and sat down with an exhausted sigh. "Do you remember when Dad used to make pancakes on Sunday mornings?" he asked suddenly, almost out of nowhere. My father looked up, surprised. "Of course I remember." My brother smiled faintly. "You always burned the first batch." My mother chuckled. "And pretended it was intentional." "Creative pancakes," my father murmured, smiling weakly. "You two used to fight over the ones that looked like animals." My brother leaned back in his chair. "I always got the dog. She always got the cat." They all looked at me then, waiting for my reaction. For the first time in a long time, I didn't look away. "I remember," I said quietly. "I remember loving those mornings." My father nodded, his expression softening. "So did I." There was something healing about those small memories. They didn't erase the pain we had faced tonight, but they offered a glimpse into a world where we had once been connected without effort. A reminder of the foundation beneath the cracks. Eventually, my mother disappeared upstairs and returned with an old photo album, one I hadn't seen in years. She placed it on the table and gently opened to the first page. There we were, younger, happier, unaware of how complicated life would become. My brother and I sat on the floor, leaning close, pointing at pictures and teasing each other about our terrible haircuts and awkward outfits. My father watched us with something like wonder, like he was seeing his children not as the distant adults we become, but as the people we used to be. My mother watched him with a quiet sadness that I couldn't fully read. We talked about simple things for a while, the camping trip where it rained the whole weekend, the time my brother got stung by a bee and cried until my father carried him around the yard, the birthday cake I ruined by sneaking a finger of frosting before dinner. These stories had lived in our family for years, but retelling them now felt different, like we were stitching together a patchwork quilt from old fragments, trying to remember the warmth it once gave us. Eventually, my father closed the album gently, as if afraid to damage the pages. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" my brother asked. "For this," my father whispered. "For being here. For letting me be honest." My mother took his hand. "You don't need to thank us for that." "I do," he insisted. "Because tonight could have gone differently. You could have walked out. You could have stayed distant." He looked at me. "You could have kept your life separate. You had every reason to." I shook my head. I didn't want a separate life. I just didn't know how to come back to this one. My father's eyes softened. "You came back. That's enough." We stayed at the table until almost midnight, long after the tea grew cold. The conversation drifted between light topics and heavier ones, but there was no more shouting, no more breaking. Only the quiet rebuilding of something we had all thought was too damaged to salvage. At one point, I noticed my brother watching our father closely, his eyes soft, full of concern he didn't bother to hide anymore. My father noticed too. He smiled gently. "You don't have to stare at me all night," he said. My brother shrugged. "Just making sure you're not about to run away." My father laughed, a tired but genuine laugh. "Where would I go?" "Knowing you," my brother smirked. "Probably the garage." My father chuckled. Fair enough. There was something beautiful in that exchange, an ease I hadn't seen between them since we were kids. Something about tonight had broken open truths that had been weighing on both of them for years. Eventually, my mother insisted we move to the living room to rest. We sat together on the couch, not touching but not distant either. The television played quietly in the background, though none of us were paying attention. It was simply a comfort, soft noise in a house that had been too silent for too long. My father leaned his head back against the cushions, eyes drifting shut. My mother tucked a blanket around him, smoothing his hair with a gentleness that made my throat tighten. "He's exhausted," she whispered. My brother nodded. "So are you." She gave him a tired smile. "I'll rest soon." I watched them, a strange warmth spreading in my chest. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like an observer in this house. I felt like a part of it. Not because everything had magically healed, but because we had finally stopped pretending. As the night deepened, my brother nudged me gently. "You staying longer?" he asked quietly. "Yeah," I said. "I think I will." He nodded, relief flickering across his face. "Good." We sat there together, watching our father sleep, listening to the steady sound of his breathing. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something close to peace settling over us. Not a perfect peace. Not a permanent one. But a beginning. A soft, tentative beginning to something new. A family learning, slowly, clumsily, how to be a family again. I stayed the night on the living room couch, covered with an old blanket that smelled faintly of laundry detergent and the past. The lamp in the corner glowed softly, casting long shadows across the room. My father slept in the armchair beside me, his breathing deep and steady, the kind of sleep that comes only after a day spent unraveling truths you never meant to say aloud. My mother slept in the next room, her door slightly open, as if she needed to hear every sound just in case. My brother spent the night in his childhood bedroom, door closed but not locked, a small crack of light spilling through the hallway. The house felt different. Lighter. Not because our problems had vanished, but because they had finally been named. There is a kind of quiet that arrives after emotional storms, not peaceful, exactly, but honest. The kind of quiet that lets you breathe without feeling like you're stealing air. I woke early, long before sunrise, to the soft sound of my father shifting in his chair. He sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes. When he noticed I was awake, he looked embarrassed. "Didn't mean to wake you," he said softly. "You didn't," I replied, sitting up. "How do you feel?" He gave a tired smile. "Like I cried more in one night than I have in the last 20 years. I nodded. "Me too." He looked around the room, taking in the dim lighting, the blanket over his legs, the untouched teacups on the coffee table. "It's strange," he murmured. "I feel lighter." I sat quietly beside him, letting him speak. "For so long," he continued, "I thought hiding things would protect you. I thought if I carried everything alone, then you wouldn't have to suffer." He paused, searching for the right words. "But maybe suffering in silence hurts more than suffering together." "Yeah," I said softly. "It does." My father looked at his hands, turning them palms up. "Your mother's stronger than I ever gave her credit for. She always has been." He nodded. "And your brother?" I didn't know he felt invisible. "You didn't look for it," I whispered. He closed his eyes. "No. I didn't." Silence settled between us, but it wasn't tense, not like before. It was the kind of silence that lets truth sit comfortably for once. "Last night was hard," my father said. "But maybe we needed it." "We did," I agreed. He turned toward me then, eyes softening. "And you," he said. "I didn't know how much you were holding inside either." I swallowed. I didn't know how to talk about it. "That makes two of us," he said with a humorless smile. We sat there for a long moment, two people learning how to see each other again after years of seeing only shadows. Then he placed a hand lightly on my shoulder. "I'm glad you came home," he said. I nodded, feeling a warmth rise in my chest. "I am too." He squeezed my shoulder, then slowly stood with the help of the armchair. "I should lie down properly. My back is killing me." "Go," I said, smiling. "I'll make something for breakfast." He raised an eyebrow. "You cook now?" "Well," I admitted, "I can burn toast less often than you at least." He chuckled, a soft, genuine chuckle that made my heart ache in a good way. "That's debatable." He shuffled down the hallway, disappearing into the bedroom he shared with my mother. I stood in the kitchen alone for a moment, staring at the cabinets, the old ceramic mugs, the faded tile. This place held so many memories, good ones, painful ones, forgotten ones. And now, new ones. As I began making coffee, my brother wandered in, hair tousled from sleep. He rubbed his eyes and leaned against the counter. "You stayed," he said. "Yeah." He nodded, as if that meant more to him than he wanted to admit. "Good. How are you feeling?" I asked. He shrugged. Like someone pulled a plug on 10 years of pressure. Then he added, quieter, "I didn't mean to dump everything last night." "You didn't dump anything," I said. "You told the truth." "It was messy truth," he said. "It was still truth." He nodded again, eyes softening. "I'm glad we talked." "Me too." He hesitated, then whispered, "I didn't know you felt so far away." "I didn't know you thought Dad didn't see you," I replied. We stood in the kitchen, two adults who had forgotten how to be siblings, slowly remembering. Finally, he nudged my arm. "You still make terrible coffee." "Unintentionally, yes." "Good," he said, smirking, "some things never change." My mother joined us a few minutes later, hair still damp from the shower, wearing the robe she'd owned since I was in middle school. She took one look at us in the kitchen, awkward, tired, but smiling, and her eyes filled instantly with tears. "Are you okay?" I asked, stepping toward her. She nodded, wiping her face. "I'm just relieved. I've been waiting for this day for a long time. The day we all cry together," my brother teased gently. "The day you two come back to me," she corrected. "I missed you." She pulled us both into a hug, tight, warm, familiar. My brother hugged her back immediately. I hesitated only a moment before letting myself fall into it. "I'm not going anywhere," I whispered into her shoulder. She sniffed and pulled back, placing her hands on both our cheeks. "You better not." We spent the morning together, talking, eating, cleaning up dishes that didn't need cleaning, filling the space with conversation simply because we finally could. My father joined us later, smiling more than I had seen him smile in months. His movements were slower, more cautious, but his eyes were clearer, like letting the weight out had given him room to breathe. At some point, my brother asked him, "Are you scared about the diagnosis?" My father paused. "Yes," he admitted. "But I'm more scared of facing it alone." "You won't," my mother said. "You won't," my brother added. "You won't," I echoed. He nodded, voice breaking. "Thank you." We didn't solve anything that day. We didn't fix the illness. We didn't erase the years of silence. But we started something important. We started talking. We started listening. We started showing up. And as I left that evening, my father walked me to the door. He leaned against the frame, looking smaller but somehow stronger. "Come over next Sunday," he said. "Pancakes." My heart twisted. "I'll be here." He smiled. "Good." As I drove away, I glanced back at the house in the rearview mirror, the same house I had avoided for so long, now glowing softly in the fading daylight. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't driving away from something. I was driving toward it. Toward healing. Toward connection. Toward the version of us we had forgotten how to be. Families don't stay whole by avoiding the cracks. They stay whole by facing them together. And that night, finally, Quietly. We did. We broke. We opened. We rebuilt. We returned. Not perfectly. But honestly. And sometimes. That's the only way love survives.